What is up? Happy Wednesday, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Bearded Tog podcast. This is Adam Mason, your host. Super cool episode coming at you today. But before, I want to talk about our first affiliates, which is kind of a cool, fun thing to talk about. So essentially what happens, there are products that I use and support and love them. And then if you guys decide to try them out and they work for you and your business, then I get a kickback from that. So not a traditional ad by any means, but I want to be most transparent as it's our first time. We've been through a lot of episodes together, up almost 100 episodes, and I just like being transparent about that. So the first one is Tave, which you guys know I talk about Tave all the time. Contracts, payments, scheduling, managing your income, managing your fees, questionnaires, everything. Tave is at the center of my business now. So I use it mostly for scheduling payments, scheduling payment reminders, managing second shooters, managing clients, but primarily for scheduling emails. That's what I love. So before a shoot, I've already sent my clients all the information they need to know ahead of time, and Tave just does that for me automatically. So if you're into Tave and want to check that out, looking for a place where you can just put everything where you need a system, Tave is for you. So go to that link in the bio and definitely check out Tave. They have a wonderful, wonderful support staff, and definitely check them out. Secondly, I want to tell you guys a little bit about RadRank. RadRank is this really, really cool SEO course from my friends Dylan and Corey, who are incredible experts, and just they are the Olympic gold medal level people of SEO, which is cool. So if you've done a session with me, or you've been to the creative conference, took my class, I like to teach SEO for like your first and second years, right? Like I want to teach you the intro, get you make sure it's approachable for you, make sure that it's something that you can do all the time. RadRank is for advanced users and for people who really, really, really want to dive deeper and have a whole encompassing vision of SEO and how that works for them and how they can attract new clients. So definitely go to RadRank, check it out. The link is in the show notes below, and I would love for you to check them out and tell them that you came from the Bearded Tog. So without any further ado, my guest, Noemie Tshinanga, is this incredible Congolese photographer, creative director, visual architect, like incredible, badass person. And I just cannot say enough good things about her. Had an opportunity to interview her, and I would say you have to check her out. So without any further ado, here's Noemie. Noemie, how's it going?
Going well. How are you?
Awesome. I always feel starting podcasts can always feel like kind of awkward or overwhelming, and you're just like, oh, this is fine. And for folks who don't know, like we do like a fake hello, so it's it's really authentic here. So we talk about this. I love your stuff. I found you got a recommendation from my good friend Andre, and I just love it, and it has so much feeling. And even I got to your about page, and it was just kind of like you still have the sense of gratitude, even though I feel like your work is so good, and it's just really strong. And so I was super impressed. And so I guess I want to just start there. Like, give me a little background on what you do. How would you even give yourself a definition? Because I feel like you do shoots, but now like it's almost like creative directing and all kinds of stuff. And then how can you still be so grateful? Like, give me some background on why you're so grateful. So
yeah. So I started taking photos when I was 14, from the influence of movies, but also just like I needed a way to express myself. Because I was just going through a lot at that time and didn't feel like writing, and I just felt like visually that would have been expressed in the most accurate way. So I took a lot of self-portraits. That was kind of my starting point. Fast forward to high school, I was in yearbook, and we had to take candidates all the time. So I had my camera on me all the time. And that's what introduced me to just being a fly on the wall in moments. Then fast forward to college. So initially I wanted to major in graphic design. I didn't get in. I was devastated. They only let 13 people in, and like 50 of us applied.
Were you trying to do graphic design like on the space shuttle or something? Like where 13 people?
Yeah. So I went to the University of Georgia. Yes, I'm calling them out.
Is that the Bulldogs?
I don't know. It was just like really competitive and like I don't know. It was such a process. But in my senior year of high school, I took a coding class, and so I figured, and I loved web design. So I was just like, okay, let me just do information systems. So I did information systems, and I also had a new media certificate, and I was also photographing on the side. And so, yeah, like all that encompassed together. And UGA had this t-shirt contest where the journalism school had one. And if you won, you got to go to New York because University of Georgia hosts the Peabody Awards. So I was able to get a ticket. So I ended up winning. And so it's like my design background got me into New York. And when I went, I was just like, I have to live here. And so, and I felt that very strongly. And so that just was like lingering in, the back of my head. So from 2014 to 2017, I went back to New York probably like 5 or 6 times for different reasons. But every time I went, I'm like, I need to be here. And so finally got to New York 2017, and I'm shortening the story so much because there's so many layers to it. But I will say one important layer that I'll mention to anyone listening, like the biggest struggle was dealing with my parents because they wanted me to stay in Atlanta. And it's always tough when you feel something within you that you're meant to do, and the people that you want to root for you in that idea don't. And they have very good reasons. It was very understandable. I'm the youngest of 3. Like, I'm Congolese, so being by myself, being a woman, I got it. But I was just like, I really had to trust myself in that process. And so moved to New York. I was a brand designer at a startup. So I got to work with my design and web in that process. And then they also just wanted to integrate photography as well. And yeah, like through that process, I was able to meet so many people just shooting around. And I ended up getting laid off from that job a year later. And I cried for 30 minutes. And then I was just like, okay, I'm fine. Like, I wasn't freaking out. I wasn't scared. And I ended up taking a staycation for 2 weeks. And then New York Fashion Week came up. And I already had like people that I was talking to. So I already had gigs. And so I went, shot for Harlem Fashion Row. They were premiering the LeBron 16s.
Okay.
And my photos got on Vogue.com the next morning. And I was just like, oh, wow. Okay. Got it. And so, yeah, that weekend I shot at Pierre Moss, and that was incredible. And then I was just like, okay, I'm going to register as an LLC and be self-employed. So, yeah, I've been self-employed for a year, and the best way to describe it is supernatural.
Okay.
Like the opportunities I've been getting, I'm like, this doesn't happen to a lot of people.
Sure. That's incredible. Like, so trying to fill in some gaps from Georgia originally. Yeah.
Okay. I was born in Belgium though.
What? Okay. Is that like I'm just assuming the Congolese family moving over, or was there life in Belgium as well?
Yeah. So my dad was a professor. And my dad, mom, brother went from Congo to Belgium. Then me and my sister were born. And then we moved to Birmingham, Alabama, actually. And we were there for a year. And then we moved to Atlanta. So I was raised in Atlanta. But yeah, it was mostly my dad's profession.
Okay. That's cool. And then how long have you been in New York? I'm just trying to...
2 years.
Okay. And then the last year, full-time freelance. Damn, that's awesome. Well, congrats. Obviously, it's like a big deal. I think freelance is like the scariest thing you could possibly go into, but it rewards the people who like are, you even said this a little bit, just going to New York in general, like we're a little bit headstrong, a little bit, like it's not that it's not scary, but the fear might be worth it on the other end. So I love that. That's cool. What do you think? It's interesting too that you were like a brand designer, and something I noticed over the last like 5 years was like like design got really big, and like every app and startup and Silicon Valley kind of vibes, and like, hey, we do a startup for this thing. Or like some of my clients now, I'm in the wedding world and they have startups, and I'm like, oh, cool. And like their branding is this color and all this stuff. But it's so funny how now it like almost turned back again and was like, hey, like photos are still helping us sell, and photos are helping us like, you know, kind of give the, like one of my corporate clients says that like, hey, we want our stuff to be really emotive, right? Like that's like one of the words they use all the time. And it's just this idea that like I had an old client back in the day that said like faces sell faces or something like that. And it was like people want to see people. And yeah, it's like, can you imagine what you do now without photography at all? Like just having, like, imagine a website now with no photos or anything like that. And it's like, well, unless it's like an iOS app, like it's probably not, you know, photography is important.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think is, like, what are you spending most of your time on now? And then, you know, like what, like, are you booked solid? Are you terrified? Like, what's kind of your current workload right now?
It's a slow start because it's 2020, but I've already, I don't know when this will drop. So, but I already photographed someone that just like means a lot to me. I can say it, but I photographed Felicia Rashad and Cicely Tyson.
Okay.
And Felicia Rashad was in the Cosby Show. She was Claire Huxtable, and it's just kind of like insane to
like an icon.
Yeah, you know, like, and she was so silly. She was so goofy. Like she couldn't focus, and it was the most entertaining thing. Like, I don't know. I was just kind of mind blown. But yeah, I mean, I have always trusted the process. So when there's stillness, when there aren't many gigs going on, it's like, okay, how do I utilize this time? Like, what does the stillness want me to do? Does it want me to be still as well? Is there something that I should work on personally, like internally, with, you know, mental health? Is there a personal project? So yeah, I mean, that's kind of been my flow. And that's where I'm at right now. So I'm very much focused on creating a foundation. And what I mean by that is having something to fall back on. You know, like it's important to go grocery shopping consistent. Sure. You know, it's important to have like food out.
Yeah.
It's important to take a walk because there's going to be moments when you won't have time to do it. And then when you shut off, it's like, okay, I already know what I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to go to Whole Foods right now, or I'm going to watch a movie because that has been my routine. So yeah, that's a space that I'm in right now. And I know more things are going to come. So it's like, why freak out, you know?
That's cool. I love that. Like being 1 year in, you know, I feel like that time is scary, right? You know, and like, you know, there's like the proper way to, you know, go full-time freelance, which I, you know, if I had to tell somebody like the safest way to do it, no one does the safest way. Like it's like people who say like they go to visit New York, right? And they're like, oh, I love New York. I'm going to move here someday. I'm just going to save up money. I'm going to move here. And most New Yorkers are like, you're never moving here. Like, it's just not happening. You know, like you'll never be prepared to move to New York and have kids. Like those are the two things. You know, but like, it's good that you have that sense of like patience. It seems like, you know, it's not just, you know, and hopefully that might be some security through, you know, financials, whatever, all that stuff. But like, you know, it's good because a lot of freelancers, you know, make decisions out of scarcity, right? Like you get that gig and you're like, this doesn't feel like me, or this doesn't feel like, you know, I could even do this to the best of my ability, or they don't want to take the time, you know, whatever might be. And then you take it because you're like, man, like groceries are due or rent's due or whatever. Have you found yourself having to take those gigs, or are you do you have like a good financial background? I don't know, like family wise, to where you're like, no, like I make sure I spread it out, or like, how's that work for you?
It's fascinating because finances have been my biggest struggle for a long time. And to your point about coming from a place of scarcity, like even when you're in a place of abundance, you still have a mindset of poverty. you know, and
Yeah.
I just paid my taxes. So, ugh. But before I paid them, I was great. And now I'm like, I'm fine. Um, yeah.
Oh.
But I'm very in tune spiritually. So when I made this decision to take the leap, I was just kind of like, God, I'm not going to freak out about this. Like, it's your job to, cover my expenses. It's your job to like pay my rent. Like, I'm not, if this is what you want me to do, because I believe our gifts are so much bigger than us, then like you're going just to provide the rest. And so I remember, when was it? It was like October 2018. Yeah, because 2020 now. Yes. October 2018. And 3 times my account was below $25.
Yeah.
And I wasn't freaking out. Like,
Yeah.
I was just kind of like, because you have options. Another thing, and to your mention about the gratitude, it's like, okay, if worse comes to worse, and I'm not saying I'm depending on this, but like, I have a place to sleep, and if I'm not able to pay rent, I can go back home in Atlanta, or I can crash on like 10 people I know that would offer their couch. Like, or there's friends of mine or people that I know that I could be like, hey, can I borrow $20? And again, like, I'm not using it as a source of dependency, but just to point out that the worst isn't the worst, because there are people in this world who don't have resources such as friendship, and they don't have, they're not in spaces where they're able to think freely. Like, being home, you can think about whatever. Like, there's still, that fear of just like, oh my gosh, I don't have that much in my account. But like, you still have a phone where you can call someone, or you can still, you still have access to like walk out of your space and, separate yourself from like where you are physically, there's just we're just surrounded by so many options, and we are aware of our options. It's just the difference about awareness, because even those, and not to diminish those who are struggling in ways that I can't imagine, like, that's still a heavy weight, absolutely. It's just that there isn't much space to provide and be like, oh, like, I don't know, like, I can sit on a bench and just like people watch. Like, there's something therapeutic about that. And so, yeah, like, I've never been scared. Even like when I decided to be an LLC, I remember I had to buy a new camera and a new MacBook, and I had to increase my credit card line.
Yeah, at the same time.
I was laying on the floor, and my roommates are just like, Noemie, like, this is for your job, like, it's fine. But I'm freaking out because I'm like, I don't want to increase my credit card. Like, but the fact that I'm able to do it, it's just like, okay, and yeah, you really just got to trust the process.
Have you ever taken a gig in the past year, maybe, where you didn't feel like it was the right pick, or you're like, that's an easy $500 or easy $1,000, like, I'll take it?
There was a gig where I'm like, wow, I wish this never happened. But at the same time, it was a huge, huge, huge learning lesson about contracts.
Yeah.
And including them in all of it, and in all of your projects, no matter how casual they may be presented. But yeah, no, there's definitely like, there's gigs where I'm just like, I don't really care for this, but I don't really feel like taking out of my savings to pay this thing. So this will cover it. So yeah, there's definitely strategy in that for sure.
That's cool. It's one of those things when I talk to a lot of my buddies, I have my ideal clients, right? And I have my ideal gigs. And, I think there's something to be said about, like, I've been full-time freelance for 5 years now. And it's one of those things where it's gotten better and better every year, but I'm still, I think part of the process is like preparing for the shoe to drop at any time, and so for me, it was always like preparing financially. What does that look like? trying to have savings in the bank. For me, I call it the war chest. So I'm like, oh, if we ever have to go to war, like whatever. Typical white dude colonialist mentality, right? No, but like, oh, of course he calls this place where he stores his money his war chest. No, but just kind of like, hey, if there's a month where I can't shoot for a month, hospital or something like that, or my wife is sick or whatever, that kind of stuff. Or the gigs don't come in, things dry up. You made a strategic decision and now things aren't booking. So I think like that kind of mindset of like, making sure you're prepared that way is super good. And ideally, you can turn down the gigs that you don't want to. But at the same time, like, I love that you're still taking gigs that are, maybe they're not what's going to go on the portfolio or the site or whatever. But there's something about, I always love talking about, we think of like actors, right? And we think of like really big, blockbuster actors, but especially in New York, right? Like, there are actors that we have no idea who they are. They're working, making money, paying rent. Maybe they've got a little IMDb page, right?
Right.
And we might never hear of them, but they're paying the bills, right? And I think there's like this, people are scared of like being a middle class freelancer where like, hey, I'm just paying my bills, have a little bit of savings. Maybe I'll take a vacation. Maybe I'll go on a date, whatever. But it's like, hey, like not all of us have to have 1 million followers or whatever, or taking million dollar gigs. It's like over time, if bills are paid, we're not stressed, we're making this happen. Like, man, at least we get to do this rather than like my alternative, was always like, oh, I'm going to go work at a coffee shop part time. Like that's what I'm going. That's my shit plan. And it's like, hey, at least we get to photograph or design or creative lead or whatever, where I don't know. I think there's just value in like doing the work, even if like 20 or 30% of it is like not the glamorous fun stuff,
Right.
Like, I think it's, my bank account doesn't care where that money comes from. My personhood does, which is why you choose and try to decide. But I think there's like, keeps you humble. That was all my point. All I have to say, I guess, is like, it keeps you humble to take gigs that you're like, hey, this is not great, but
No, I love the phrase middle class entrepreneur. People don't think about that. Like that's amazing, because you think you have to be like the only entrepreneurs that we highlight are the ones that have like above 500,000. You know what I mean? What if you're good at like 50,000, Like what if that is like fine with you? So I think that's awesome. I never thought about that.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think it just helps too, because it's easy for all of us. I'm sure you struggle with this of like whether it's like imposter syndrome or just like not feeling good enough, or like, hey, can I do this? But at the same time, it's like you've been successful for a year. Like that's a huge deal, and like if you can be successful for another year, like that's really cool. And like doing the work that you want to do or pretty close to it, it's like, why not? Like, why can't that be happiness? And maybe that's just me like making excuses for being like, hey, I am not a celebrity, but my bills are paid, we've got money away, my wife and I could go on vacation. What more do you need in life? Whatever your like essentials are. But at the same time, it's like, no, I think there's another podcaster said this way, is like, if you're a full-time freelancer and it's working for you, like you might not be Michael Jordan, but you're in the NBA,
Ooh,
that's
like good.
Like you're in the league, you're playing, you're on the team, you're still like making it happen. But I think oftentimes we say, oh, I'm not the star, but it's like, no, like we're happening. And like, I don't have 10,000 followers. I can't swipe up.
That's all I want. I just want to swipe up.
Right. I feel we just released like an IGTV video, and it'll let you swipe up on those. And I'm like, oh yeah, go watch this, swipe up. Like, please go do it. But it's one of those things where, like for us, we put a ton of money away last year, and we took on a lot more gigs to try and do that so that we could have like more flexibility and take on only portfolio gigs, if you will. And that's cool. And like, that freedom to do that. And, you know, people might not look at our Instagram profiles and be like, oh yeah, they're amazing, you know, or whatever. Or like for you, like, you know, worked with Spotify and worked with Common and like all these cool things. And it's like, we're so quick to like discredit the success of
Just
people with small followings. Yeah. And just doing it, just making it work. And like, I don't care if you have to take headshots for the Whole Foods you mentioned, right? Like if a manager's like, hey, we're going to do some, or you're doing like a Whole Foods Christmas party or something like that. You'd be like, hey, it's easy money. I shop here, whatever. Like, you know, I'm not trying to get this on in any kind of like brand style guide, but you know, it works. And I don't know, there's something about it, you know?
No, that's super important.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about like I think I read on one of your bios, and I just love this because I love the word intentionality. You were like intentional about my shit or something like that. So
yeah.
What ways are you intentional in general? Like tell me, it can be personal or professional. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, on the personal side, I value relationships so deeply. Because that was something that I had friends growing up. Like I'm still good friends with my childhood best friend, but I was so lost back then, which I didn't know until now.
Sure.
And so being in a space where now I can be fully myself and I know who that is, and people still accept me and want to be around me, like, because I cherish that so much, I want to be mindful of who they are and what their stories are and how I can be better for them. And even just like within a family perspective, like there's always growth in being a better daughter, a better sister, a better aunt. And so that requires me just recognizing my weaknesses and my blind spots. And I just got a therapist, so I'm just like, oof, that's going to be a journey. But, you know, because this is a goal of like, I never want to be in a place where I'm blaming others, you know? It always starts with me in some facet. Obviously, someone can like do something wrong on their side, but like that's on them. The only thing I can control is myself. And so I'm very just intentional on how I approach things. And, you know, I'm thoughtful. I'm not really impulsive, super patient, empathetic. On the professional side, I would say the intentionality goes through personal projects specifically. So just like videos that I create with my friends, you know, it might be a simple video to me or to others, but in my head, I'm like, this actually would be a really great commercial. And so I think about like, oh, what's a commercial that I would want to shoot? Okay, and let me see if I can frame it in something that's already happening in life and just do it in a more casual sense. Or with shooting, if like, I really love clothes, I love fashion, I love style. So it's just like, okay, what are ways I can capture clothing because I want to shoot a lookbook with someone. And so just approaching it from a place that I want to be hired for is where the intention comes in, where it's just like, I don't want to shoot just to shoot. Like, I just want something to come out from this. Or even last year I did a video project with a friend of mine, and because I realize, you know, the best work comes through teams and collaboration. And because I often work by myself, I'm like, the end goal of that project was working with a team. So I hired a stylist. I hired a second cameraman. That was like the first time I had to direct someone, or I had to articulate my thoughts and be like, do you understand where I'm coming from? And then also giving space for them to do their job. So just kind of letting go that control. So yeah, it's the intention mostly comes through personal projects of like, what do I want to do now that I do for myself that I could get paid for? Yeah.
That's cool. I think that's like that's the most healthy kind of approach I've seen where it comes to personal work. And like, you know, yeah, when you first like got a camera, maybe you would just shoot to shoot, right? Like, 'cause you're like, but then like, yeah, once you get better or comfortable or you hit like, you know, a certain level there's like, okay, well, how can I make this work for me? Or how can I stretch myself? And like, I love the idea of like practicing, quote unquote, practicing, like harder or as hard as you need to perform at. And so even for you, like shooting this video project, the next time you have a project like this, one, I mean, shooting that hopefully brings a project like that. And then two, being on set like that already, you're like, oh, my feet are wet. Like I already kind of get this, right? Like the first time it's kind of like, oh shit, like, what's going on, right? Like I'm managing all these people, you know, and then, but that second time it's going to be even easier, which levels you up. So you can like actually focus on whatever it is like you need to focus on.
Yeah.
Like if it is directing rather than like that kind of stuff. I think it's cool. Like I don't know. I like that. That inspires me because I'm just like, oh yeah, like, yeah, I want to make a lookbook. Okay, well let's make a lookbook now for ourselves and then like, try and pitch it to somebody or just do it for the act of like getting this effort in, put the reps in, if you will. I think a lot of freelancers like are like, yeah, I don't shoot this yet, but if I get hired for it, of course I would start shooting it or whatever. And it's like, they're only going to, most clients are wise enough now to like hire somebody who's already in it, right? Like,
right, exactly.
My wedding clients, when I tell them, yeah, we've shot over 1 million photos, we've shot 200 weddings, like, and we like weddings still, which I feel like most photographers are like, oh, please, no, bad juju. But it's like, clients can trust that, there's something to it. But like, oh yeah, this person knows, they're familiar with what's going to happen versus like somebody who's never shot a wedding or never shot like a high-end event or something like that. So I think that's cool. That's awesome. I want to go shoot right now and like make something cool. So I'm like, damn,
there you go.
Come on. That's cool. What, yeah, tell me a little bit more. I want to know, like, well, one, I have to ask about this. You shot all kinds of like cool stuff that we could obviously name drop because you're awesome. I'll try not to as much. We'll name drop in the intro, right? That's when we were going to hype you up. But this one thing you shot that I saw on your site that I thought was just kind of cool.
Yeah.
Missy Elliott's VMA party. And there's like Missy Elliott, Queen Latifah, Ice-T, like, I feel like middle school Adam looked at these photos and was like, holy crap, like this is awesome. So how did you get that gig and what was that like? And then I think too, I ask a third question. So why do I ask questions in bulk? I don't know.
You're fine.
But like I want to know, I've only done this a few times, but certain times when you're shooting like multiple celebrities or it's a big thing, right? Like that's for her. But then there are other people that are huge there. Was there anything after that I feel like people don't talk about where like, hey, is Queen Latifah's team DMing you, hey, can we get a copy of that? Or are they talking to whoever hired you, the agency or whatever? How did that work as well? So I'm just kind of curious that. So like, how'd you get the gig? What was it like? And then, what was kind of the aftermath, quote unquote, of like, how fast did you have to deliver? And then were teams, were people harping on you? Did you get a lot of like Instagram reposts, I guess? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah, so I got that gig through Courvoisier. They're a client of mine. So they were the sponsor of the party. Okay. And I've worked with them before, so that was that connection. It was crazy because that night I was so sick. And I'm just like, I don't know if I'm able to go to this. Like, and I was fine skipping it, but I couldn't because I think the party started like at 11 and ended at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I was insane for even going, but I made it work. And I don't support, it's like body first, job later. But anyways, it was still amazing. That was the first time from a celebrity standpoint that people highlighted celebrities. And what I mean by that is like, I've worked with notable people enough to recognize that they're people. And my style, I want to be consistent with my style. So like, I want to give, the person walking past that, may be in service or like, waitress or whatever, or just like a random attendee, like the same energy that I would give to, Queen Latifah.
Sure. Yeah.
because it just feels awkward to do it the other way around.
Yeah.
But, press needs the photos of them, so it's like you kind of have to be you have to give more attention, and that was actually very awkward for me because I'm just like they also feel like they're just like everyone else, so no one's like pompous or stand out, but it's just like that was an interesting experience for me, but it was still amazing. Like I was just like, that's Missy Elliott, like that's and it's helpful to know the other thing that was insane was that I didn't know who was coming. So I didn't know what to expect. Usually when I'm given a heads up of like, oh, so-and-so will be here, so-and-so will be here, I'm like, okay, cool. I have my freak out moment now. So when they're there, like, I'm fine. So like, I didn't know Queen Latifah was coming. And like, I have a moment where I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's her. And I'm like, okay, I have to take a photo. Like I had to like get back into the professional world. Yeah. When Regina King walked through though, I was like, I need a minute. Like, just give me a second. I'll, get what you need. But like, that's fucking Regina King. Like, what? It's just, that's another hard thing. It's like, I can't freak out like everyone else. I have to just stay like, oh, hey, what's up? And then after the fact, as far as just like people reaching out, I think there isn't really a direct correlation of like, hey, we love the shot that you did of this specific person. Can you do other shots? But it's more so of, we can tell you're comfortable with them and you're professional with them.
Yeah.
That means you're able to do another shoot. And that actually happened. I don't mean to do this as a name drop, but that happened with a private party for Hillary Clinton.
Oh, cool.
A friend of a friend was just like, do you know someone who's able to hold their own in this type of space and just like keep it professional? And so it's more so just like how you navigate as well. Like that's just as important as the photos themselves. It's like, are you able to respect them? Are you able to give them their space? Like, so that's the continuation from there where people are just like, oh, she has experience with this type of talent. She'll probably be able to do other things.
Yeah, that's super important. I think when you work with, somebody like that, like a presidential candidate / former Secretary of State, right? Like big deal, security, Secret Service, and then in addition, like the whatever celebrity is attached to that, it's important that you can like balance. But one thing I found, and you might have found this too. You can already tell. I know this is our first time like formally meeting, but I'm a pretty happy guy. Like try to be positive. I love people. I have this natural curiosity. But when I've been around, photographing like celebrities or kind of like quote unquote big names or whatever, I'm like hyper professional until, I'm still professional, but I will let a little bit of my personality out when it's time to take a photo and be like, oh, that looks, even something as silly as like, oh, that looks really great. Or, hey, I love that outfit. Or I'll make a joke or something like that. And kind of like what you were talking about before, where if you talked about seeing people alongside of the street or like people just walking by and treating them the same way that you would want to treat the quote unquote celebrity. But I think our like notable people as well, they like when they're just treated like people on the street as well, and it's really cool. And I don't know why, at least for me, that's like one of my personal values is like bring people who don't feel like they should be up, and then people who just want to be normal and are already like quote unquote like exalted, like treat them how I'd want to be treated in that situation. And it's so cool. And then what happens is, at least for me, I know this probably happened to you, is like they'll come up to you and be like, hey, thank you so much. Like, you're just so chill. And you're like, why are you talking to me? Or whatever. Like, you're like, professionalism gone. I was doing a charity event in New York City probably 2 or 3 years ago. And I had shot this event like 6 times, volunteer. I love this organization. So that they'd call me every year and be like, Adam, can you come? I'm like, sure. And then I'd drive up the 4 hours, 5 hours from DC for free to volunteer, shoot this event. Just because I love this organization. But I was always in charge of shooting like this kind of red carpet, kind of like the VIPs arriving and making like a cool portrait. Like they really wanted to do like the Vanity Fair thing where like all the celebrities and they'll like pose them. So like, Adam, we want as close as you can get to this, but still quick. And I was like, okay, so we can't like go crazy, but we could at least have pretty photos in a cool location.
Right.
And, you know, I'm shooting like these people who are big to me and then like models, which, you know, again, this is like 3 years ago, and I'm just like, oh, I didn't know people were actually this pretty in person. Like, what?
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah. But the only time I've ever been starstruck, and I used to shoot concerts for a living, and I was like a backstage photographer for a big festival, and so like, again, it was easy just to like treat people like people. But the number one time I was starstruck, a photographer who ironically I've interviewed on this podcast, who I like looked up to and I thought he was amazing. He comes up behind me, taps me on the shoulder, and somehow he knew my name. Maybe he just asked the lady there and was like, "Hey, Adam, can you take a photo of my wife and I as well?" And I was like, yes, you know? Yeah. And that was crazy. And then like he posted that to his Instagram, and it, like, it was my, you know, I would say my most liked photo as far as I know. And, it was so cool, and I was like, dang it, like all my professionalism went out the window on a person I didn't think it would, right? Like I would think I would be like, oh yeah, it'd probably go out if I met President Obama or Hillary Clinton or whatever. And I'm like, people know this photographer, and he's definitely like famous, but not like the other two, you know? So
no, there's definitely photographers I have freaked out over.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
We'll have to get him on the podcast, and then we'll just like, hey, do you have a chance to talk? And then we'll pull you in. You're like, oh crap, Adam tricked me. And be like, yeah. What's up? That's awesome. What do you have anything coming up this year? Do you like, I know you mentioned that winter is like kind of dry, but you said you have some relationships with some other clients, or are you just kind of waiting on them to be like, hey, we've got something for you in March, or we've got this thing happening this month? Like, what are you looking at 2020?
So Fashion Week's coming up. So I know I have one thing for sure going on for that, or actually two. That's my goal, is with each month I know that there's going to be something coming up related to just natural events.
Okay.
So yeah, something coming up then. But right now I'm just like working on a personal project that's going to take a year to make, which was very intentional, because I go like, when I have an idea, I just execute it, and I'm like, okay, that's it. So this is the first one, and just back to being intentional. This is the first one where I'm like, I have to plan this out. I have to storyboard. I am involving other people and just taking my time with it. So that's in the works. But yeah, that's it so far. I'm sure things will pop up over time.
Can you give us a clue about the personal project?
It involves menswear in relation to their geographic location.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's super cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You mentioned Fashion Week. I have a few friends that will go up and shoot, and what I found is that like it's kind of chaotic. Like you'll go there for one gig and you're like, okay, I'm going to shoot this, and by the end of that gig, somebody's already reached out and they're like, oh, are you coming to this thing tomorrow? And you're like, well, I wasn't planning on it, but for, you know, $2,500, I can be there tomorrow too.
Right.
You know, and they're like, cool, sign us up. Here's my digits, like whatever. Yeah. So do you think that'll happen as well? Like, have you shot Fashion Week before?
I have. It's my favorite. I usually do BTS. Capturing the show itself is personally boring for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love or presentations. Presentations are cool. I do want to do street style at some point, like just stand outside and capture people. But yeah, I love being behind the scenes the most.
Okay, that's cool. That's awesome. I totally had a question, and then we totally lost it. What is I want to know about the self portraits, because I feel like for a photographer, you have a lot of photos of you that are really, really good, and I'm jealous mostly, and you just look cool. Like that's just like vanity. I'm just like, oh yeah, she looks so cool. But we were like, we have to have this girl on the podcast. So Yeah. What do you just do a lot of self portraits, or are you just around a lot of other creatives who are always like shooting and just happen to be baller, you know?
No, they're all self-portraits with my remote. Yeah, it's actually it's gotten to a point where it's a form of therapy.
Mm,
Yeah, especially because that's how I started out. So it's in a weird way, it's like this thing that I did as a kid, and I'm like,
sure.
oh, I can just, bring that back out. But it it is weird when people look at it when I'm right there. Like it's just
Yeah.
like you're looking at my face. Like in that moment, I feel like a narcissist, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, am I like super vain or I don't know. It's just a weird experience. But yeah, no, I mean, it also helps me when I shoot other people, when it comes
Mm,
to posing or how I feel comfortable or knowing what clothes looks good in front
sure.
of a camera. Because like you can wear something and it looks great and then on a camera it just looks awkward.
Mm.
So yeah, it's a form of practice, a form of therapy. But yeah.
That's cool. I looked through
Mhm.
a bunch on your site, like probably just like kept scrolling. I think my favorite is the one of you're kind of chilling on like a cardboard box, I think.
Oh yeah, that's when
Yeah.
we moved to a house, which was a
Okay.
big deal.
That's awesome. When was that?
That was in 2015. And so, yeah, we lived in a townhome for a long time. And my parents always wanted to live in a house. And so that was our first house, and we still live in it. And it was just very transitional for all of us, just because, like my parents and like my dad has a PhD in mathematics, he's a software engineer. My mom's a seamstress and like very intelligent people, but unfortunately, with people receive them differently because of their accents. And
Mm,
and so like there's just been a lot of setbacks just because of where they're from. And so it's so aggravating and so frustrating. And I don't think my parents view the house as a form of validation, but it is still like something meaningful
yeah.
within our family, because we are the only family that lives in the US. I've never met my grandmothers and grandfather. I've never met
Mm,
my actual aunts and uncles. Like, so there's this pressure of living a certain lifestyle to honor them in a way.
yeah.
So yeah, I was just like, oh, this is a box. It's a moving box. Let me get inside it. I don't know. I just kind of like experiment. I'm like, this seems deep to me. I'm
Yeah.
gonna do it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's cool. And I mean, do two questions. Do all of your
yeah.
self portraits kind of have something like that? Like as like a meaning behind them, or will some just be like, oh, I need to do this as to see what I feel like essentially?
Um, my earlier ones definitely did.
Okay.
There was, and like I can look at them now and know how I feel, like know that what that was referencing, to the
Mm,
point where again, like when other people look at it, I feel like they see it too, but they have no idea.
mm,
So they're very personal to me. I would say nowadays, because I've crossed a threshold in understanding who I am, and like I'm much more stable in that, but it's less personal and just much more like experimental and practice.
mm. So at the beginning,
Yeah.
it was more definitely expression, and you're like, this is how I
Hmm.
feel. Like this is, not to diminish these, but it's like if another kid knows how to play an instrument and they're like, hey, this is my song, I'm singing, or I'm stressed out, or whatever's
Yeah.
happening, you're like, this is my self-portrait to try and like
Hmm.
encapsulate what's happening. Practical
Hmm.
question just for the photo lovers out here, like how do you actually do it? Like tripod and timer? Like do you have a preferred lens for your self-portraits? Like some look like you like 85, so I'm like, oh man, that sounds so challenging. But
No, they're all 50.
okay,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, shoot
cool.
with the Canon 5D Mark III.
Yeah.
Wireless remote. I
Do you scan for
usually
focus, or does it autofocus for you? Like, so you'll just like, hopefully the
Oh,
camera
it
guess.
autofocuses.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. There was a time where I had to do manual, which like I had to stack books and
Yeah,
focus and then
yeah,
go, oh yeah, wow, I
yeah.
forgot about that. But yeah, I figure out the framing beforehand and I just shoot. And it's funny now because friends of mine, they have a game where they try to locate the remote. Like,
Oh.
is she holding it? Does she hide it somewhere? And you can tell, like, if you look, you'll see me holding the remote.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Or some don't have your
that's pretty much
hands.
it. What was that?
On some of them, you just don't show your hands. Like it's like probably like
Right.
collarbone up, which I think is probably like
Mm-hmm.
for some reason, you don't have to go into it, but that's also probably a choice as well. You're like, hey, this is like
Mm-hmm.
what I want to show of me. And then other
Right.
times you're like, hey, like, look at all of me looks great, or all of this looks like how I want to show. So
Yeah.
that's super cool. Awesome. Well, very cool. Is there anything else you want to talk? Anything you feel like you need to say to the world? No, just kidding. Like, I love it. This is great. I would talk to you forever, but because I just feel like I could literally just go through your site and be like, okay, yeah, like you shot for the New York Times. Like, tell me about that. You shot for Spotify. Tell me about
Yeah,
that.
that's
Like,
crazy.
yeah. But like, what are you hoping for 2020? Like outside of gigs, like what are you hoping for? This is a good question, I think. What do you want to have accomplished by this time next year as a freelancer?
Ooh. Um. This time next year. I mean, to switch it over to video, just having a short film at Sundance. That's my goal, which is happening this weekend. There's that. And then just from a photography standpoint, I don't know yet. I don't know. Because I've accomplished so much last year. Like if we just bring that same thing this year, but I got to think bigger. So I can't. Oh, actually, no, I will say this. I
Okay.
would love to be a still photographer on set for a movie.
Okay.
That is like this time next year, I would have accomplished that.
Do you nitty gritty? Do you think like at least like BTS or even more like, oh, I'm going to portrait with all the actors or something like that?
Both.
Okay.
Because I didn't know that was a thing until when Beale Street came out.
Okay.
And they posted the photos from the movie, but it wasn't actual scenes. It was like set up photography, like,
Yeah.
photos. And so just like, oh, like they actually like set this up for a photo and not for the video. And so I did a little digging and I found the photographer who shot it. And I'm like, oh, like there's someone actually in charge of doing this. Like, count me in. I would love, like, oh, that would be amazing.
That's cool.
So yeah.
I love when you find those like other gigs and you're like, I didn't know that these people had a photographer, but now I do. And that's what I want to do. Or like one of my big corporate clients is, like a very boring, like you would, if I said the name, you'd be like, okay, cool, whatever. But it's like, you find out that everything has a niche. So like there, you talk about your mom, like there are seamstresses conventions probably. And then like your dad, like there are definitely mathematics conventions or whatever. And, one of my corporate clients, it's like they've helped out the income side of things, right? This is one of those gigs that like I'll never show on Instagram. I'm like, I don't really care about this personally, but it's super cool and they have way too much money to spend. I'm like, okay, I'm really glad that they will spend some of that on me. So I love when you kind of find those like other gigs that you don't know actually happen, or like I shot this this like science event where they put scientists, you'll actually like this, I feel like there's scientists and storytellers together to help the scientists like tell their stories, because scientists I feel like are not as good at telling stories, and then the storytellers are always looking for content. So like, what does this mean? Why does this matter? Because what? And so it's really, really cool to see like the combination of like this purpose, right? Like these passionate scientists, and then the storytellers. One, you get to learn, and we love to learn wherever we're at and like find out more and like try and use our camera as a passport to kind of see what's going on. But it's cool. That's awesome. Well, hey, I appreciate you. And it's just so cool to get to talk to you. I appreciate you. And thanks for being our guinea pig on the microphone.
Oh, of course. Thank you for having me and sending this awesome mic.
Where can people go? Where would you like people to go to find out more about you? And I always encourage people who listen to actually go and DM you. So is there anything you want to know from people who listen to this, and what do you want people to know about?
Um, oof. What do I want them to know? I want them to know that I am open-minded. Um, and if they have an idea, like it doesn't have to be perfect. A quick example of that, I actually hired 2 interns,
Nice.
and one
Congrats.
of
Oh my
them.
gosh.
Wait, what was that?
I said, oh my gosh, congrats. You're a beast.
Oh.
That's insane. Like, first year freelance. I got 2 interns. What's up?
Thank you. Yeah, but one of them in the application process, like because I want to see their work. The content that she sent were videos that she shot on her phone. Like she only shot them on her phone. It was just gorgeous. Like it was amazing. And so, yeah, like I'm definitely open-minded. Don't feel like you have to present yourself in a certain way. One thing that I'm recognizing is when people see my work, they assume that I am at this level. And I'm
Yeah.
like way above, and it's just like, no, oh my gosh, that's far from the truth. Yeah, and that's about it.
Well, I think that says something about you. Like, Noemie, right? Noemie? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yep.
Awesome. Making sure we're still getting it is like your work is so good and so curated. Like that's what I'm attracted to, and that's something I struggle with. Is like when I have people who help me like submit my work to publications, and they're so much better at it than I am. Whereas, I'll be like, oh yeah, these are my 10 favorite photos. And we're like, no, 9 of these are not good, or 9 of these are not what we're looking for. But I felt like your work both on Instagram and then your site, and then kind of, there was like a diversity of it where you're doing a lot of things, which I thought was cool. But at the same time, it just had this same like feel, and I was like, it was very mature and very like, you could tell you've been doing this since you were 14, essentially like that. Now you've just been you just been pouring gas on that fire for I don't know, 6 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever.
Yeah.
And so yeah, your work is good, and you should feel like you're a badass. So you should feel like you're awesome. I appreciate that you're like, hey, like you're being humble, but you're awesome. So I appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
Cool. Well, hey, thank you so much. I'm glad that it worked out and the internet worked. But yeah, this should drop. I think we're going to try, if you need for just personal curiosity, the 12th, February 12th.
Oh, nice. Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So it should be cool. And then let me know if you have any issues. You have my number. If you have any issues sending back the mic, there's a label in there. If you need tape or something, whatever, just let me know. But yeah, I hope Fashion Week goes well. Let me know how it goes, and I'm excited. I'll tag you and everything when this drops. But seriously, thank you so much. And if you think of any other creators that that you're like, Adam needs to know these people, and we're like, we need to give a megaphone to them, definitely let me know. Like I'm always taking suggestions, and like I trust guests' opinion as much as possible. So yeah, I appreciate your input, and thank you for everything. That was so cool. I love talking to Noemie. She is just a badass powerhouse of a lady coming at you from New York, right? Where like I feel like you have to be good at what you do in order to be successful. And with her being full-time freelance for just a year and being so mature and having such a head on her shoulders, like I did not think, and I just was not that type of person when I first started. I felt like I was scrambling, right? Like a lot of us feel like we're in scarcity and we're just trying to go for it. And she just has this maturity, this presence, this depth, which I think is really cool and is really needed. And I think, shows in her work, but also that's going to give her so much longevity in the industry, in the creative industry, because of having a good head on her shoulders. So cool. Definitely check out her work on Instagram. We'll link that in the bio or the show notes, of course. And tell her you said hi. Tell her you came from the Bearded Tog. I would super appreciate that. Want to say thanks again to Tave for hooking up our affiliate link for this episode. So if you're looking for a place to do your contracts, manage your reports, manage invoicing and payments, and then if you're into SEO and trying to make your website be able to be found by more people, your ideal clients, trying to get that traffic, more eyes on your work, definitely check out RadRank. That is the advanced level, I feel like, of SEO. So if you've seen our free resources, you've seen on Patreon or mentorship, and you've done that, and you're like, all right, I want to go deeper, RadRank is where it's at. The guys Dylan and Corey are awesome. So definitely check those guys out. Thank you guys so much for being here. Keep being awesome.